Thank you. Good morning. I'm so glad to be here, and you're getting to experience rain, which we haven't seen in a very long time. So it's hard to be sad about the amount of it and the flooding, but hopefully you'll be able to enjoy San Antonio. It's a beautiful city, and we'll get some sunny weather back for you while you're here. So it's my pleasure this morning to be here to talk with you about what San Antonio is doing around early childhood. I'm going to start by just giving you an overview of what PreK for SA is broadly, and then we're going to engage in a conversation with these two superstars. So Roland Toscano, who's the superintendent of East Central ISD, is an example of public schools coming around to support early childhood and in the process making their district even stronger and better. We actually had a group out from Tempe, Arizona last week that came to see PreK for SA, but we featured East Central ISD as an example, and their team, it's phenomenal what they've been able to do under Roland's leadership. And then Peter Holt is also, in addition to his many business ventures, he is the chair of our Early Matters initiative, which is bringing business leaders to the early childhood conversation. Also a huge champion, a huge player in this arena, so you're going to get a chance to hear from them, and then we'll open up for questions. But first I'll do a little bit of an overview. All right, so what is PreK for SA? We are a workforce development initiative. We're actually underneath the Better Jobs Act in the state of Texas, which allows local municipalities to raise a sales tax for workforce development initiatives, and they're very prescriptive in what those workforce development initiatives can be. One of those is early childhood. And so our mission is to develop a world-class workforce in one generation through high-quality early childhood education. And we do that through our 4 pillars, which are PreK for SA. We have model schools that serve young children. We have free best-in-class professional learning for any early learning educator in the San Antonio region, serving children birth through age 8. We award grants to other programs to help them improve quality and access, and then also family engagement, because families are the first and most important teachers of their children. I want to just share with you kind of our strategic goals that are set by our board of directors, which is to expand access to all 3- and 4-year-olds in San Antonio. We want to make sure every 3- and 4-year-old whose family wishes them to be enrolled in a public or into a program has that opportunity. We also want to strengthen the infrastructure from birth through age 5, because we know that childcare, as you've heard, is in crisis actually all over the nation. And San Antonio, while we're strengthening it, we still have work to do. We want to elevate and support families as the first and most important teachers of their children, but also as advocates and leaders in the community. Also to develop and retain top talent in early childhood. There are not enough early childhood teachers out there, and so part of our mission is to help build that pipeline. And then finally, to do research and policy work that helps to advance the field of early childhood. So our education centers, we serve 2,000 children in our 4 centers, and they are cleverly named North, South, East, and West, because that's where they're located. So there's 500 3- and 4-year-olds in each of those. Primarily the children, any child in San Antonio is eligible to apply to go to PreK for SA, but the vast majority of our seats are reserved for those children at the lowest end of the economic scale. We also are Military City USA, so any military affiliated family also has the option to go to PreK for SA free of charge. We meet the highest national standards. We're NACE accredited. We have certified teachers, we have an evidence-based curriculum, and we are based in developmentally appropriate practice, which is play-based learning, because that leads to the longest term outcomes. We have extended hours for working families, because it's hard for a working family to stop at 3 p.m. and pick up their child. And then we also have free transportation to make sure that we are accessible to every family. Our education centers also serve as innovation hubs to help address some of the most challenging problems for young children. San Antonio, unfortunately, has a very high rate of childhood diabetes and obesity, so we have a very strong focus on health and wellness, and that includes a garden table initiative, helping families to develop healthy eating habits by making small changes with big impacts. We also want to develop engaged citizens, so we have a civic engagement initiative where our young children vote on a nonprofit during election time, and then they work with local artists to create a art piece, that's part of our Arts Infusion, in the spring, and we put those art pieces in an exhibit and auction them off, and the money that's raised from that auction goes back to support the nonprofit. So our young children learn that they don't have to wait to grow up to contribute to their city, they can do that today. And then we have a huge outdoor learning initiative because our young children don't get outside enough, and that is affecting their health and wellness. So all of our centers are equipped. We've built out beautiful outdoor learning spaces, and our children spend at least an hour outside each morning. And then our newest innovation is a water safety initiative. We're working with the Miss Tristan Foundation to make sure that all of our 3 and 4-year-olds get lessons on how to be safe around water, because we want to prevent childhood drownings. We have professional learning. We're focused on improving instruction pre-K through or birth through 3rd grade. So there's more than 20,000 hours annually offered, and it comes in all forms: seminars, job-embedded coaching, one-to-one coaching with specialists. We are agnostic in our support. It doesn't make any difference to us who is providing the support to young children, as long as they are focused on quality and improving access in a way that helps families. And so we work with public, private, parochial, nonprofits, child development centers, schools, you name it, family home providers. We're there to support. And then we also provide initial certification program, which is a CDA. And so every year we develop at least 40 new early learning educators for our community. Our grants program, we award over $4 million annually in grants. Again, any provider is eligible for these. We support over 4,000 additional children through our grants program. And we have recently started in the last few years a shared services model, which is helping child development centers come together in an alliance to reduce their business costs. So we want them to increase their business model, because they are small businesses. Most child care centers are small businesses owned by women of color, and the profit margins in child care centers are razor thin, and so we want to help them maximize those so they can stay in business and provide high quality care, as well as pay their employees a living wage. And then, of course, family engagement is huge. We have over 10,000 family interactions each year. Our services are based on family interests and needs. We're interested in connecting them to long-term services throughout the community. San Antonio is very rich in services for families, and we want to make sure that our families are well connected to those. We also focus on workforce and post-secondary education for families, because we know that the more that they can work and earn, the better position they are to support their families. And then we want to create a network of families learning from each other to value the assets that they have. So, how did PreK for SA start? We started in 2011 with the Brain Power Task Force, which was appointed by our then mayor, Julian Castro. And this task force was led by key business leaders, Charles Butt, who is the founder of the H-E-B grocery store chain, which is legendary and a fantastic, the best grocery store chain in the world. I kid you not. My daughter went off to college in DC, and she said the only thing I miss about Texas is H-E-B. And very community minded. And then General Roland, who was the head at that time of USAA, and again, we're Military City USA, so those are two big powerhouses, but also other key business and education leaders who came together to study how could San Antonio improve its education system to improve its workforce. And because they spent a year studying this, and because they're really smart people, they landed on early childhood. Because as we heard earlier, that 90% of the brain develops before the age of 5, but even more importantly, in the first few years of life, young children's brains are developing 1 million neural connections a second. That means not just every day matters, but every minute matters in a young child's life. And so they put together a plan to address this by opening up pre-K centers, but also supporting early childhood across the community. And so what that means, what the research says about early childhood, is that communities that invest early and invest in high quality end up with higher educational attainment, better income earning workforce, better health outcomes, and a stronger workforce in general. A lot of times people talk about the benefits of early childhood being in the first few years, and they are, but the most powerful benefits of high quality early childhood are actually in the adult years. It's long lasting, and there's decades of research that shows that there is no fade out effect. It may not affect every 3rd grade test score, but it affects people's long-term outcomes. If it's high quality, that's the key. It has to be high quality. As I say, mediocre pre-K doesn't change anything. All right, so they put it to the voters, and the voters had to agree to raise the sales tax. And in 2012, there was a 53% of the vote. At the end of early voting, there was only an 87 vote lead for PreK for SA. In 2020, when we went up for reauthorization, in no small part thanks to these two gentlemen sitting next to me, PreK for SA had 73% of the vote. In fact, it was so strong that by the time early voting was done and they released the results, we knew it was in the bag. There was such favorable support for PreK for SA that we passed decidedly. Our governance structure and finances. So we are both a nonprofit 501c3 nonprofit organization, municipal development corporation, also a city department. So there is a board of directors that is appointed by city council, and it's more than advisory. They have the ability to enter into contracts. They technically hire and fire the CEO, but all of our city employees, or all of our employees are actually city employees, and so we're also a city department. So my daily reporting is to the city manager. We meet monthly, our board meets monthly or bi-monthly to make decisions on that. And it's primarily, it's a mix of business leaders and education leaders who serve on that board. Sales tax funding, we get an 1/8 of a cent sales tax, which the state regulates how much sales tax local communities can charge or raise. And so there is actually a 1/4 cent. You've heard, I think, or will hear from our Ready to Work program, which is also getting an 8%. We get an 8% of that, which is about 10% of the city's sales tax. It's collected by the state, and then it goes to the city and then to the corporation. So the funding, primarily the majority of our funding does come from the sales tax, but we also get additional funding through the state and local match for education, because most of the children who are enrolled at PreK per se are duly enrolled in the school district. So the school district gets to get credit for those children. They pull down the funding. In exchange, we ask for the majority of the funding that comes from the state, but there is about $400 that per child that the district keeps for overhead costs. We also do participate in the CACFP program, which is the food program, so we get reimbursed from there. And we do have sliding scale tuition for families that don't qualify for free public pre-K, so we get a small percentage, because again, we want to be open to every family in San Antonio. What are the results? So part of the brilliance of the design of PreK per se, and I can't take credit, I wasn't here when it started, I came in 2016, was that the board built in external evaluation from the get-go. And what that external evaluation has shown, the children come into PreK per se year over year below the national norm, they leave the program well above the national norm in key indicators. And then before we went up for our reauthorization, we wanted to say, what's the benefit to the community? So we commissioned a return on investment study by University of Pennsylvania, which they have a whole center on educational return on investment. And what that study found was that in the first 8 years of the program, PreK per se returned over $59 million to the city of San Antonio, or to the community of San Antonio, in real measurable benefits beyond the cost of the program. And we asked them to take a very conservative approach. We didn't even look at some of the other features of the program. We were really just looking at the schools and some of the things that were easily measured, so that we could say, yes, this does make a difference. And this is what all the research on early childhood shows, is that you actually get a return on investment for early childhood. You don't get that same return on investment in other educational initiatives. All right, I'm gonna stop there, and we're gonna start a conversation. And again, I'm gonna let Peter and Roland introduce themselves just briefly, and then we'll go into kind of a discussion, and we'll save some time at the end for questions that you guys might have.
So Roland, Toscano, Superintendent of Schools in East Central ISD, which is it's one of 17 school districts in San Antonio. Our school district has a little over 11,000 students in 13 schools. I've been in this particular role 8 years, which is about the same length of time that PreK has been on the ground here in San Antonio. And so I'm excited to discuss our journey from the ISD side.
Morning, y'all. Welcome to San Antonio. Like was mentioned, my name is Peter Holt. I'm the CEO of Holt. What that means is we're a Caterpillar dealership and a family of other industrial distribution brands and companies. We have about 4,000 employees. The vast majority of those employees are technical in nature, so think diesel mechanics, welders, parts people, etc. My journey into early early matters, pre-K for SA, anything, childcare is a bit meandering. First of all, it was actually my only real job other than working in the family business was assistant kindergarten teacher when I was going to community college here. And so I quickly learned how awful the world would be if I continued teaching. So I went back to family business, and my first job out of kind of college and real work in the company was over all of our service departments, and what I found was a very odd dynamic where we had hundreds of open jobs that paid really, really well with very little secondary or post-secondary needs, and we couldn't find people. So I kind of went on this journey to see where are all the mechanics, where are all the technicians, where are all the parts people. And in San Antonio, I guess maybe like other communities, if you start asking questions, they tell you to do things. And so I started getting involved really with workforce initiatives first, and found, much like I found in childcare or early child learning, is that there's just a whole lot of myths out there, and so that really was my journey to kind of early childcare was realizing that this a lot of these are my opinions. So I'm in the private sector, so I can just say whatever I want. Which is nice, and it don't always have to be true. I guess the public can kind of do that too. But I've found is that there's in my opinion, the resource model for our education system and people development system is wrong, in my opinion. It's completely flipped upside down. It's also one of the oddest things where, from a funding standpoint, if you look at every charity, if you look at most government programs, kids rule. You show a sad kid on TV, the money starts flowing, baby. Other than early education. And I haven't figured out how to fix that. I don't think anybody really has, other than Oklahoma, that stuck it in under the dark of night, figured out how to do it. But we spend an inordinate amount of our dollars, of our brain power, of our employees, of our just all resources you can think about, really on high school and college. Like that's, if you look at the funding and do the research, that's where all the money goes to. Yet a tremendous amount of effort in probably not college, but community college you could argue, but definitely high school and probably creeping into middle school is fixing things you could have for a much lower amount of dollar and a lower amount of people and a lower amount of time. You could have done from ages 3 to 8. You could have fixed a lot, and that's not just education. That's behavioral. The longitudinal study, not the UPenn one, but the UTSA did a longitudinal study on the first cohort of pre-K for SA. One of the biggest learnings was they had but a significant decrease in behavioral issues at the kids that came out of pre-K for SA versus kids that had no early education, formal quality early education, and so. It's just swamped, and so San Antonio also has a significant generational population. We have crazy low unemployment. Our population is growing. Our median wages are growing. Yet we have about 17% of our population that's under the federal poverty line. So for a family of 4, what is that? 30K, 25K, something crazy, right? I mean, it's that's for a family of 4, right? If it's 2. Yeah. So, just think about that, right? That's a significant amount, and most of those 20% came from families. communities that were in that bracket. And so we just have a lot of kind of, in my opinion, really Jekyll and Hyde issues in San Antonio. And so that's really why I got involved. The other reason I got involved is because there's a community in Texas, Fort Worth, that has, this is one of the rare issues where there's been some communities that have not literally fixed it, but close to fixed it, close to actually achieved high quality early learning spots for almost all the kids in a community, and seen drastic improvements in poverty rates, unemployment rates, behavioral issues, all kinds of family health dynamics. And so, that's really why I'm involved in early education improvement.
So I feel compelled to offer some context to about 10 years ago in the private sector. Great job, Peter, by the way, for your comments. 10 years ago, we had a pre-K situation in the city where 17 ISDs all did something different with pre-K. It was a variation of limited to no pre-K in some ISDs, to half-day pre-K, to full-day pre-K, and all programs only admitted students who qualified for which we received some degree of funding. So every ISD in the city was not independent school district, sorry, thank you. So we have 17 independent school districts. So every one of us was serving 4-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds to some degree, but every one of us could easily overlay data to indicate the number of 3 and 4-year-olds in our communities that were not being served in any kind of early learning environment. And the data was clear about the opportunities we were missing. At the same time, San Antonio became a target, a hotspot, if you will, for charter competition. A lot of investment to support it. And I'm not moving into a conversation about one versus the other, but I know it's very similar to what you guys are experiencing in Kansas City. And so about 10 to 15% and growing of all school-age children were attending charter schools. So on the ISD side, it was very much a perspective of competition, of threat, of defense. And so when pre-K, universal pre-K was considered as a city initiative, the first reaction from K-12 was a defensive posture, right? The city is not an expert in education, and you guys are trying to put something together to serve a very small percentage of students and concentrate a whole lot of dollars to try and prove that y'all know how to do education better than we do. So we're not on board, right? And the second thing is, this model that you're trying to roll out sounds exactly like the national model for charter schools, where we're going to be a laboratory for innovation with the spirit of learning what works best, and then transitioning that in the K-12 system and then scaling it, right? We're not going to be fooled by that. And so your first effort probably included some of that complexity. And we as superintendents did not feel like we were at the table in those conversations. There was a lot of research that was done. It was precisely conclusive of what needs to be done, but it was absent of ISD representation from the view of ISD superintendents. And I wouldn't say we've gotten completely past that, but to continue the conversation about our experience and the way we were able to eventually shift the perspective to what could be possible, I think can give you hope for your next effort to work with your superintendents and to really realize the potential of what can happen from an economic development and workforce development standpoint, and from a transformational standpoint for children who, many of which are coming from generational poverty.
So I'm going to say one other thing, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question you want to come up to a microphone as we get ready to that, if someone comes up, then we'll take a question. Otherwise, we'll keep going on because these guys are pretty great, right? So you can see why they are part of this. Yes, absolutely. Round of applause. So for me, I spent most of my time, first of all, I'm a Midwestern girl, I grew up in Illinois, in deer country though, so, but Peter and I can be friends, yeah. So, but I've been converted. So I spent most of my time in Austin, and then I was I worked in the school district there, and then I was a professor at Texas State, prepared principals and superintendents for public schools. So when I saw the opportunity at PreK for SA, and I thought, this is brilliant, because yes, they have models of what it looks like, but they're also supporting the school districts and everybody else are doing professional development, and the school districts never have enough money to be able to really focus on early childhood. They've got so many needs. I just came in thinking, oh, the superintendent's gonna love this. So I was a little surprised, like, wait, what's not to love about this? And you get to keep some of the money, and you don't have to educate the whole kid. Like, I was then understanding how it came to be, and working on those relationships is really critical. And as Roland said, not every superintendent is still a fan, and they're never gonna, some of them are never gonna get on board. I'm like, okay, you don't have to be on board, that's all right. But let's work with the ones who are, and I think Roland's a great example of somebody who saw the potential, and his board wasn't on board initially. So he did a lot of work with his board to say, this actually could work for us. And then his team, he has a phenomenal team that was able to say, let's leverage the dollars, the grant dollars, to show that we've got a great program, and let's put in the things that we've always dreamed of putting in and being able to build that. They have a phenomenal, if you want to see a school district that's got phenomenal early learning going on, among other things, go see East Central. It's superstars, because they moved away from that defensive stance and said, how can we leverage this to make our experiences for our children and families even better? And then I think with Peter, the question I have for you in terms of, and first of all, I did not know that you were an assistant teacher in a
Dirty little secret.
all this time, so I've learned something new. This is great. So now
That was terrible.
No.
Go ask.
We were all terrible when we first started. I think about my nightmare of a first-year teacher. I was like, oh my goodness, those children. So, Peter, when you talk to other business leaders who may not understand all that you do about early learning, what are some of the things you hear, and how do you respond, and how do you help them come to understand the importance of this?
Well, first of all, I'll say, Roland and we have some really incredible superintendents here in the community. What Roland was describing is can make education and workforce issues messy in San Antonio because we just have so many. It's a numbers game. It can be structurally challenging. The other thing I'll say is that in most things, in my opinion again, but most things in education, there are a lot of issues where everybody's right. Like you can just find every voice at the table, they're not wrong. Like that's a hard thing about it, right? Like all the community members, the families, the sports people, like everybody is correct in a lot of the logic or the research or whatever. And that's what makes this problem such an issue, or such can create chaos. And what I'll say about that is that that's when leadership matters. That's when you have to have some brave leaders that just say, okay, here's 8 right decisions. Here's what I think is the best for the ultimate constituents of the education system, which are the kids and the families. And Roland has done that, and I think others have done in the community, and should be applauded for that, because that's not easy. To answer the question, what I'll say is that I don't know if I've been tremendously successful, quite honestly, because, well, my theory is because that most businesses that employ take small businesses out. So most businesses that are going to employ 100 or more people are usually run by, I'll be one of them one day, unfortunately, old white dudes. And they're just way more removed from this issue than, say, I am, because I got little kids under 10 right now, or they're workers. And so I don't think there's a lot of malintention from the business community. It's not like, oh, man, woke up today and chosen 3-year-old that I'm just gonna hate today. Like most of them, probably some of them, but like most of them don't wake up thinking that. And on the other side of the spectrum, I would say that a whole lot of them do wake up thinking of their people and attracting new people or retaining good people or culture, you know, like those things are real. Like leaders are thinking about that. They're thinking about how to retain, attract, and develop great people, because that's what we've now gladly come to realize as most business leaders, is that's what a business is, just a group of people trying to do generally one common purpose. And so, you know, trying to like sandwich those closer together, right? This issue is directly related to the issue that you're thinking about. It's not as far away as you think. I think that's generally the message that I've given. And then on anything workforce, what I tell most business leaders, because you know usually business leaders, if there's any requests or anything, the first person they call is their CFO, right? They call the money person. And so what I tell them is in anything workforce, because I'm a believer in internships, I'm a believer, you know, name some business engagement, talent pipeline initiatives. I like most of them, not maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. As I tell them, first start straight capitalist greedy man. You know, just like go in and run all the Excel models you want to run. In my experience, I haven't found one where there's an investment, even if it looks like a charitable donation, but where there's an investment where there's not a return. I just haven't found that yet. And so the tricky one specifically with early education is that it is less direct. And so bridging that gap is going to have to take some leadership. But in my opinion, the Dallas Fed was actually in Texas. Dallas Fed was actually one of the very first organizations to do a very large study on the direct sole economic, no behavioral, no crime or feel good stuff, straight economic benefits of investing in early child care. And so, you know, that's what I usually try to tell leaders when it's not top of mind. But I'll tell you, you know, I don't think it's an area I don't think I'm tremendously successful. I think that workforce development, education, especially early education, there's a long ways to go around business engagement.
I would say that's, many of you probably know this, but the case for early childhood was really made by the economists. So if you look at Nobel laureate economist James Heckman's work at the University of Chicago, it's all about the investment and the return on it. And they are really much more compelling when you're talking not only with business leaders, but with community leaders around the long-term benefits. There's both short and long-term benefits, real tangible benefits to investing early in childcare. Are there any questions? I just want to make sure.
Guys, we've got a mic in the middle of the room here. Just come, stand in line.
The one thing really quick, while you get ready for your question, one thing I'll say is that every community is a little different. And so if you are gonna make a push in this, you know, I would, you know, we're very lucky that we do have some organizations locally that have done some research, but specifically around the dynamic. So for example, if we just followed some other communities that have done this, Charlotte, Oklahoma City, or you know, some cities in Oklahoma, maybe it was Tulsa, and Fort Worth, we would have missed the mark a little bit in the fact that we actually don't have a volume issue. There's a ton of child care centers in San Antonio. It's a quality issue here. And so, and we do have some public education partners that are interested. So we can actually get to seats pretty fast here in San Antonio, where other communities, it was the other way around. They had to work on actual centers and buildings and seats. And so I would encourage you to look at your individual communities because there are differences.
Clint Robinson, recovering school board member. I have a question about numbers. And it was, I think you said 500 per school, 4 schools, so 2,000, right? $4 million, $2,000 per kid. what is the average cost per student in ISD of the 45,000 kids in all of the ISDs or in your 10,000 person school? On a cost per student basis, is what you're getting from the 8-cent sales tax enough to provide the curriculum that you want for these kids? And then the second part is there a waiting list? Because 2,000 kids, based on the total number of people that live here and are eligible, is there a growth plan?
Yeah, so I'll answer that and then I'll let Roland speak a little bit. This is one of the issues. People would take our budget and, they'd say they take the, 45 million they get from sales tax and divide by 2,000 kids. And they're like, that's $30,000 per kid. I'm like, okay, but that's not how it's all spent. So we did a comparison, and we actually are on par with our school districts, and they spend a little bit. There's variance, but on average, per hour especially, because we run a 10-hour day versus a 7-hour day, it's very similar to what our school districts are doing. And then in terms of the 2,000 children, there are about 25, probably 26,000 4-year-olds every year in San Antonio. So obviously we're not serving the majority of them. The PreK, our model schools were never designed to do that. They are demonstration sites on what it looks like, what's possible. We have windows in all of our classrooms. We do a lot of training in there because we wanted to work with the other providers, as Peter said, and Roland said, there are plenty of classrooms out there. We want to make sure they were quality. And so, yes, we do have a waiting list. We have 7,000 applications this year for our 2,000 seats, but that gives us an opportunity to say, hey, there are great programs out there too. There are, in our public schools, in your faith-based programs, let's get you connected to it. And so part of our work has been to educate the community as well. When PreK started, not everybody believed 4-year-olds should be in school. And even as late as 2017, there was like, yeah, maybe not. And before we went out for reauthorization, we wanted to go to 3-year-olds, and the community was like, no, 3-year-olds don't belong in school. So we had to do a lot of work on that, and now we've gotten, people are like, okay, yeah, 3-year-olds can go to school. So.
Good morning, Stacey Grange, Chief of Police, Kansas Missouri Police Department. So I'm gonna bring this in a different direction for you, because this is how I'm receiving this information that I think is very important. So when I came into this position, I led with a citywide approach to violent crime. This, and the line has taken by violence in Kansas City, everyone should be concerned. I've had a great response from the business community of Kansas City. So in speaking in this space about this topic, since you've been doing this for 11 years, I've heard you talk about generational poverty. We have a generational violence problem in Kansas City, which I'm sure that goes hand in hand with generational poverty as you speak of. I'm curious about two things. Starting kids out, obviously PreK, some of our kiddos that are involved in those cycles of violence or that generational trauma that's in their family. I'm curious if that has affected some of the youth involved in violent crime. And I say that because from what I've seen in Kansas City, and I'm not proud to talk about this, so we are all here to look at solutions, is seeing kids become involved in gun violence at a younger and younger age. When I was a young officer, it was like maybe 16, 17. We're looking at 14 and 15-year-olds involved in violent crime. So I'm curious of how you foresee or have seen, getting kids started out into early PreK, how that's affected youth involved in violence. And I forgot my second question because I'm so focused on this.
So I can comment on that. Before we were able to establish the partnership with PreKSA, in our own district, we had funded full-day PreK, so it was a pretty substantial investment on our part. We spent about $14,500 per 5-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old in our system. About $8,000 per student, the rest of K-12. So big investment. But the only children that were attending, as I mentioned before, were either they qualified because of income, which was the majority, and then if they were military families or special needs children. But the majority were from poverty. And we had had a full-day program for more than 20 years. So we were able to track the longitudinal data. And while we were not able to determine that they were substantially achieving better than their peers academically, they were graduating and avoiding alternative education placements and behavioral referral experiences through their K-12, it wasn't even comparable. So that was where I first got the board to see we need to reimagine our investments in pre-K, because it's not all about academic achievement, because the research shows the benefits are much beyond that, and they sustain through life. And it was that data was a tipping point for our board to say, okay, tell us more about what you're thinking, wise guy, about this partnership with the city, because now you got our attention.
Thank you, that's exactly what I was looking for. So my second question was, the violence that we see in Kansas City, sometimes it's an argument. Well, not sometimes, obviously, most of the time it's an argument and it's relational. So while I understand like 3-year-olds and their problem that they have regulating their emotions, I'm curious within this curriculum that you've created, if there is that emotional regulation, that conflict resolution. Okay.
So high quality early childhood by definition has that embedded in it. What you're describing in terms of children's ability to be able to regulate their behavior, solve problems, avoid conflict is part of the executive function. And you can read there's the Harvard Center for the Development of the Child has a bunch of articles, a bunch of information on this, but essentially it's the brain function that helps us to set goals, make a plan, implement the plan, adjust the plan if it's not working, all those kinds of things. And the time to develop that, the most efficient time to develop that is between the ages of 3 and 5. And so our curriculum is all around that. And we teach our kids conflict resolution. In fact, we hear that from our families. Sometimes the children will go home and their parents are arguing and they'll say, it sounds like we have a problem. And they walk their parents through the process. So our children actually are their own problem solvers. If you love for you to have a chance to come out to our school sometime and we're able to look at this visit, you can see the children negotiating between, they don't go to the teacher to solve the problem, they negotiate it themselves, and that's part of that executive function that helps them get not just to, but through whatever life's challenges are.
The other thing that I'll just say is that the self-worth that is developed at such a young age. Before I had kids, I thought there was some more nature versus nurture, but kids, they nurture, meaning the parents did it. And what I realize now is that the peer-to-peer development happens at such a young age, especially when it comes to self-worth. And you can have as many siblings or friends over or whatever, but the level of self-worth appreciation that happens when they go to strangers, peers at a school, whether that's through their learning or just how they communicate with others, is significant. And I don't think irreplaceable in other places, other avenues, but is so organic within quality childcare centers.
I just want to say, I appreciate you saying that because some of our kids are like survival mode, like worrying about what they're going to eat, and they're so ingrained in trauma at home. There's just such a lack of even a schedule or just chaos. So when you're in these spaces where you feel safe, and also when kids get older, there's that self-sabotage, thinking that when they're in a good space that they don't deserve it.
And so high quality early childhood is an antidote to the effects of trauma. It really is. It is one of the ways to repair the brain. High quality early childhood is really about brain development. And sustained trauma interferes with brain development. High quality early childhood helps to repair that. And so even if a child's living in stress, and many of our families do, or many of our children do, that coming to a school where they have that opportunity helps literally build a strong brain.
We have time for these 2 questions, as long as they're succinct and answers are.
Okay. I got you.
Good.
Do not know about the succinct part. Molly Agawam, I'm the Chancellor of the University of Missouri, Kansas City, but prior to that, I was here as Dean and Provost at UTSA. First of all, thank you for being here this morning. Totally agree with HEB. Best grocery store. I wish we could get that beyond South Texas. Thank you. Your involvement with something this big person as prominent as you is very helpful. I was here during the early days of the discussion of when Julian Castro first brought it up and how it was not well received in the beginning. Obviously, if you look at what you showed, now there's much more support when you re-up it. What were some of the specific metrics? Longitudinal data takes a long time to untangle, so it couldn't just have been, hey, it's a good thing. There was some specific metrics that you could point to in the short run that got people turned around.
So quickly, it was the kindergarten readiness, those data, and the study that Peter referred to from UTSA that showed our children did better in math, reading, behavior, attendance, all those sorts of things. But we had an approach called hearts and minds, because sometimes when we showed people the data, they got angry. They didn't really want to see the data because they were so convinced that it wasn't working. So it was really about relationships. I went to every Optimist club, every Elks club, every club there was, had conversations with people, and what I always say is I walked toward the danger. So people that were critics, I thought they were critics just because they didn't have the information to become supporters. And not everybody became a supporter, but in fact, one of our strongest critics on the first round became the treasurer for the PAC on the second round. So, but that was all about helping people understand the benefits and talking to them, as Peter said, as business people, like making the case. Young children are cute and all that, but that's not, when you're talking dollars and cents, you have to be able to bring that ROI study to show there's a real return on investment. That helped. And, I don't know, and Peter helped to lead that effort, so I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you.
I've talked to all of you already, so you already know I work in this space, but Deidre Anderson, for those that haven't met me, I am all about early childhood and everything according to Tracy Lewis. I can talk about this early childhood because it's that important. 2 questions, and I've been asked to kind of bring in the rear and talk a little bit about what we already have tried to do in Kansas City. My question first is around eligibility and enrollment and how you ensure the children that need it the most are receiving the service.
So we have an eligibility list that's based on the state has criteria, and as Roland mentioned, most of that is around income, but it's 250% of the federal poverty line. We realize that families who make, and that's about $50,000 a year for a family of 4, but in San Antonio it costs about $80,000 a year to afford it in the private sector. So our scale goes all the way up to $80,000 a year, family comes free of charge. Then we talk about military, children with special needs, fosters. Everybody applies, but then we pull the students by category, so we make sure that the majority of our children come from the lowest income families, that we do reserve about 10% of our slots for that tuition. So that's really how we make sure, but more importantly then, for families that we can't serve because we don't have room, getting them connected to our partner program so that they have that opportunity.
And the last is more around governance, with you being under the umbrella of the city. What, I guess, statutes or whatever to ensure that, I know that you have the tax that's passed, but how is that operationalized in a way where the next mayor that doesn't care about pre-K the same way might come along and obliterate it?
Yeah, and it's under that Better Jobs Act, which is a state law that says that a city can set up a municipal development corporation, and by that statute, it has to have a quasi-independent board. It's appointed by city council, but city council does not have the authority to go in and tell us that the tax is dedicated. The voters said 1/8 of a cent is going to pre-K for SA, and there is no ability for the city to do anything else with it. It all goes to pre-K for SA, and then the board decides how we're going to spend it. And that's why we've been able to transition from initially supporting the school districts to build out their programs, and now we're really moving into the child development centers, birth through age 4, to build out their programs and using the dollars in that way so that we can have the infrastructure. We've gone through 3 mayors, so it started with Roland Castro, and then we had Ivy Taylor, and now we've had Mayor Nuremberg, and they're all, they're supportive of it, and we've had council people who are very critical of it. They don't have enough influence because of the structure of it to be able to sabotage it.
Great.
Deidre,
You want me to?
yeah, so you guys, I don't need a mic sadly. We usually go to a Kansas City response after some of these sessions because Kansas City has worked so doggone hard in this space. But we're running out of time because of the weather. Nobody in this room, besides Deidre, maybe Joe Reardon a bit, knows what we tried to do in Kansas City with pre-K. So I'm just going to have Deidre share a quick response, tell you why this is all relative to Greater Kansas City. teachers.
Oh, no pressure.
And then I'll go to our sponsors for the next session.
Actually, I just want to say, this, for all of us in Kansas City, we think that we have unique problems. We do not. I heard multiple school districts, charter schools, challenges with superintendents. We had all those things. I've lived through 2 failed ballot initiatives, a statewide cigarette tax, and then the local sales tax. We love kids in Kansas City. We have not been able to figure out how we want to work to address the challenges in Kansas City around our kids. Uniquenesses to Kansas City are, we do have a supply issue, major supply issue. Only 50% of kids in the Kansas City region are currently being cared for. The pandemic has continued to obliterate initiatives. I'm among one of those. We had 3 facilities at the beginning, in the middle of the pandemic, and now we're currently operating one of them. One is permanently closed, the other one, we're trying to rebuild the workforce. And so I think that we acted like kids when the last sales tax failed, and we need to pick our toys up, and we need to kick the can on down the road, and we need to keep working on this issue. And I challenge us to figure out what our brain power task force is going to be when we get back.